topic, history of the Constitution. But before we start, let us know first the learning objectives of the topic. First is to provide the student citizenship education through the study of Philippine government and constitution. Second is to study dynamics of the Philippines as a democratic and republican government. Third, help students to understand and appreciate the 1987 Constitution as the fundamental charter of the land and our previous constitutions. Lastly, to enable the students formulate their own perspectives and responses to the pressing issues of the times. Before the new curriculum, there is actually a separate subject for the Philippine Constitution. But under our present curriculum, it is being incorporated in the readings in Philippine History 100. That's why every major topics are being encapsulated in this subject, okay? Unlike before, that there is really a separate subject for tax, for Philippine Constitution, and the one we discussed before, the Agrarian Reform Program, okay? So let's start. What is the meaning of constitutional law? The term constitution refers to that body of rules and principles in accordance with which the powers of sovereignty are exercised. Constitution refers really to a document wherein which our laws, our rights, and our privileges are enshrined. Okay, so what do you mean by sovereignty? Sovereignty refers to the supreme authority of the state, which means that the state can create laws, can punish people if there's a violation. So it's actually a document. It's actually a basis for the state to prosecute a certain people, a certain person who is violating a crime. Okay. What are the purposes of the Constitution? One, it serves as the fundamental law of the land. It is the paramount law onto which all other laws are based on. As far as the Philippine government is concerned, Constitution is the most powerful. It's the most dominant. It's the basis of all our laws in the land. So our ordinances, our resolutions, our RAs or Republic Acts created by our legislators, they are based in the Constitution. So therefore, all these laws, all our ordinances should be consistent with what the Constitution says. Second is it provides the essential framework of government, since the essential branches of government, which are the executive, legislative, and the judicial branches, are defined therein. So that refers to the constitution of government. So there's in every government, there is actually a framework, because framework would define or delineate the certain functions or responsibilities of every branch. Diba? We have 3 branches of government: the legislative, the executive, and the judicial department. We will deal with them one by one later on. Okay, so without this framework, we would be confused, no? Or our public officials would not know how are they going to provide services for the people. Okay. So what are the different laws in the Philippines? We have local laws, national laws, and of course the Constitution. Constitution is the supreme law. Okay, all our national laws and all our local laws must be based and must not contravene the Constitution. So when we say supreme, it is the most powerful. Okay, so what do you mean, or what are other examples of national laws? These are Republic Acts, executive orders by the president, okay, presidential decrees, when there is a declaration of holidays, for instance. These are considered as national laws, okay? When we hear of local laws, this refers to laws promulgated by our local government units, such as ordinances, the anti-smoking ordinance in Davao City, no, that's one. Executive orders issued by the mayor, for instance. So these are local laws. Okay, so in these 3 laws, Constitution is the most supreme. A constitution provides for the structure of the organization, that is the legislative, the executive, and judicial branch of government. We all know legislative their duty is to create law, to make laws. Okay? Executive department, their duty is to execute these laws, to implement these laws. Okay? And when we say judicial branch of government, this refers to a branch of government which interprets the law. Okay? So in case when there is violation of any law created by legislative department and executed by the executive department, the judicial branch of government is there to, of course, to define these crimes and to punish this person violating a certain law. Okay, that includes the giving of the period of sentence, the amount of fine or punishment that you are going to pay, and all those stuff. Okay. Next, the methods of selection of the individuals to fill the positions in the structures are specified. We all know that in the Constitution, we have the right of suffrage or suffrage, no? Meaning the right to vote. So all these things are enshrined in the Constitution. That means every Filipino, for as long as you are already 18 years of age and you are qualified and you are registered, then you can exercise your right of suffrage. Okay, under, I think, Article 5. Article 4 is citizenship. So Article 5 refers to the right of suffrage. Last, a Bill of Rights is also included in state constitutions, just as in the National Constitution. Bill of Rights under Article 3 of the Constitution, no? We have there different rights. Right to property, right to life, right to due process, right to equality, right to information, etc., etc. All right. So what are the requisites? What are the requirements of having a good written constitution? As to form, constitution should be broad, brief, definite. So this means that when you write a constitution, always remember that you are not writing a novel, no? So just like if you are making your constitution and bylaws in your different organizations, school organizations, no? You're not supposed to be writing a novel. So constitution should be brief, but you are not compromising comprehensiveness. So it should be brief, but it is it covers all the things that you needed or all the things that you need to include in your organization. So it must be brief without compromising comprehensiveness. As to content, what are the contents of the Constitution? Constitution of government. There should be a government. So ano ito? The three branches of government. Constitution of liberty. These are the rights, the privileges of the people. No, right to travel, right to abode. Okay. What else? Right to be presumed innocent until proven guilty. Okay, right in the custodial investigation, Miranda rights, etc. Okay, Constitution of sovereignty. Again, ano itong sovereignty? Sovereignty is the supreme authority of the state. So the powers and functions of the government are likewise delineated in the Constitution. Okay, so why is it that we are talking here about the written Constitution? Because prior to civilization, they used unwritten constitution, di ba? Particularly in the old monarchical government, they use unwritten constitution. So what do we mean by unwritten constitution? There is no document as basis of their laws. So where did they base their laws at that time? They base it on the words which come out from the mouth of the king or the queen or the emperor. So there's no written constitution. There's no document. So whatever comes out from the mouth of the monarch, that serves as the law. Okay? So if I want, let's say, if I am the monarch and I want to kill A, okay, I will order the police to kill A. So that forms a law. That forms part of the law of the land. But now, can you do that? No, because our constitution is written. Okay. So before we proceed, let's look at some constitutional history, and just to give you a review, of what we have discussed so far in this subject. So we all know that in 1542, Spanish claimed the islands. In 1898, Spain cedes the Philippines to the U.S. As I've said, when Ferdinand Magellan arrived in the Philippines, that was not yet a colonization. There was no colonization yet. No, the colonization started when Juan Miguel de Legazpi arrived in the Philippines. Okay? Niabot lang si Magellan sa Philippines. It's because of the spices. Okay? In 1902, U.S. establishes civil government to replace military rule. So I think on December 10, 1898, Treaty of Paris was signed by Spain and U.S. government. So after the Spanish government colonized the Philippines, U.S. government took over. In 1935, Commonwealth of the Philippines was established under President Manuel Quezon. Okay. In 1941, after the U.S. government, Japanese invaded the islands. So some people would say that we were colonized by Japanese, we were colonized by Americans, but actually we were not colonized. No, the only country which colonized the Philippines was Spanish government. Again, colonization is different from occupation. Okay, American government occupied us, Japanese government occupied us, but definitely they did not colonize us, because when we say colonization, a country is under the authority of the principal country, which colonized a certain country, just like in this case, the Philippine government. So, di ba, during the Spanish colonization, we were under the King of Spain. But in both Japanese government and U.S. government, we were not under the President of America, no? Or the head of the state of Japanese government. Okay? We were merely occupied by these two countries. Okay? So the proper term would be American occupation and Japanese occupation, not Japanese colonization. In 1944, the U.S. retakes the island. In 1946, U.S. grants the new Republic of the Philippines full independence. And also in 1965, Ferdinand Marcos becomes president. No? In 1969, Marcos is re-elected despite allegations of elections fraud. Vietnam protests begin. Muslim separatists begin guerrilla war in the South. So, umani sila mga terorista, no, nga nasa bukid at that time. In 1972, the declaration, September 12, 1972, was a declaration of martial law, suspends parliaments, arrests opposition leaders, and imposes censorship regulations. In 1973, new constitution adopted, granting Marcos broad powers. Why? Because in 1972, that was supposed to be the last term of Marcos or President Marcos. But in the 1973, 1973 Constitution gave him power not to extend his term as president. So therefore, in 1981, Marcos wins re-election and martial law was lifted. In 1983, opposition leader Benigno Aquino killed as he returns to the Philippines from exile. So from US, that was I think there's a video on YouTube about Aquino's assassination. In 1986, Marcos opposed in elections by Aquino's widow, Corazon, because of the mass protest, the first EDSA revolution. All right. So much for that. Now we go on to the meat of the discussion. Okay. So we'll begin with the Malolos Constitution. Technically, Malolos Constitution is not the first constitution in the Philippines. The first constitution was Biak na Bato, right? But for purposes of or legally speaking, Malolos Constitution really is the recognized and legitimate constitution, first legitimate constitution in the Philippines. Okay. However, this constitution or this document was written in Spanish. Okay, this is also the first Republican constitution in Asia. So it's very ironic because most of the countries in Asia, if we compare it, Philippines really was one of the first or the few countries who first achieved its independence. But ironically, we were still not progressive as other countries or as our neighboring countries in the Southeast Asian region. No, so we're supposed to have developed already because as compared to them, they have been under a colony for, let's say, mga 1950s or 1960s. No, but in our case, in 1946, independent na ta. Okay? Pero slow gihapon ang progress sa Philippines. So the document declares that the people have exclusive sovereignty. Again, it is a government of the people. It states basic civil rights, the separation of church and state. So kaning mga rights na siya sa Malolos Constitution, although they were written in Spanish, and call for the creation of an assembly of representatives which would act as legislative body. Ang tawag sa ilahang mga senator sa una kay assembly of representatives, but in our case, di ba, we have a bicameral legislature. When we say bicameral, it consists of two, no? So we have the House of Senate and the House of Representative. When we say House of Senate, kanang mga senador. When we say House of Representatives, kanang mga congressmen, no? It also calls for a presidential form of government. Okay, when we say presidential form of government, the president is both the head of the state and head of the government. So sa una, under the Malolos Constitution, 4 years lang ang term. Okay? How about in the Philippines now? 6 years, but you can only hold office for 1 term. 1 term is equivalent to 6 years. Who approved Malolos Constitution? President Emilio Aguinaldo on January 21, 1899, and served as the constitution of the first Philippine Republic. All right. 1935 Constitution. This was during the American occupation. It was written in 1934, approved and adopted by the Commonwealth of the Philippines, and later used by the Third Republic of the Philippines. Okay. As we all know, Philippines has been so loyal to U.S. government, no? Because after the Spanish government, U.S. government took over. Okay. But maybe the Filipinos thought at that time that the U.S. government would help us in the same way they helped Cuba. No, because Cuba is also one of the colonies of Spanish government. No, as we all know, diba, sa most of the colonies of Spain, kay katong naa sa Latin, tawag gani, itong mga Latin countries like Mexico, Puerto Rico, okay, Cuba, okay. Kani sila, mga colonies ni sila sa Spanish government. And in that case, US government helped Cuban government to achieve its independence because US government has business interests in Cuba. And of course, they helped Cuba to achieve its independence. That's actually what happened also to the Philippines. But we thought that they would help us plainly for achieving our independence, but look at what happened. They occupied the Philippines. Okay. It was written with an eye to meeting the approval of the United States government so as to ensure that the US would live up to its promise to grant the Philippines independence and not have a premise to hold its possession, on the grounds that it was too politically immature and hence unready for full real independence. So according to the US government, since you are Philippines, you are still politically immature. You cannot handle your people. You cannot handle your own government. So let us help you to work on it to provide you constitution so that you will have your basis later on. And by the time na ready na kayo, so we will give you your independence. Okay? And remember, di ba, in Trusteeship Council of the United Nations, one of the purposes of the Trusteeship Council is to help those countries who have not yet attained its independence, di ba? So, just a review. All right. 1935 Constitution provides for a unicameral legislature in contrast to a bicameral. When we say unicameral, there's only one chamber, no? And a single 6-year term for the president. Unicameral legislature, so legislature can be unicameral or bicameral. When we say unicameral, it's composed of one chamber. When we say bicameral, from the word itself, bi, that means 2 chambers. Okay? But presently, we have bicameral legislature. Okay, so what's the difference between Malolos and 1935 Constitution? Sa Malolos, only 4 years. But in 1935, it has a 6-year term for the president to hold office. It was amended in 1940 to have a bicameral Congress. No? So as you can see, giusab nila from unicameral to bicameral. But we will not deal with them with the actually it has advantages and disadvantages, but we will not discuss them because that's too technical. What composes bicameral Congress? A Senate and House of Representatives, as well as the creation of an independent commission on elections. So this is the first, actually, during our study of political science, dito sa 1935 Constitution, nagkaroon ng rise of different political parties and different political ideologies. No? Kaning mga Liberal Party, kaning mga Nationalista Party, these are actually hybrid groups. No? Kay gisagol-sagol na nila. Okay? So, during the 1935, dito talaga nag-start ang rise of the different political parties in the Philippines. The Constitution limited the president to a 4-year term with a maximum of 2 consecutive terms in the office. Actually, naabtan pa ni Marcos ang 4-year term. So, kaya gani naabot siya og for pila ka years? I think 20. No? 20 ba? Okay. Because natapos niya ang 4-year term, 2, tapos pag-change ng Constitution in 1973, nakatakbo na naman siya ulit. Okay, you get it? So, in 1972, he's supposed to be done, no, as president. But when they enacted the 1973 Constitution, Marcos' term as president was extended because he was allowed to run as president. 1943 Constitution provided strong executive powers. The legislature consisted of a National Assembly and only those considered as anti-US could stand for election. So it's very evident there is already a clash between US government and Japanese government. So there's already a Cold War between the two countries. Okay, so you are only welcome in the 1943 Constitution if you are anti-US, no? So you should really support Japanese government. So Hideki to Johad promised the Filipinos the honor of independence, which meant that the commission would be supplanted by a formal republic. So Hideki was actually a veteran, war veteran. Also, 1943 Constitution, it was drafted to be established under the Japanese occupation. No? However, it is limited in duration, provide for indirect legislative elections, and an even stronger executive branch. So, 1943 Constitution did not really receive general acceptance coming from the Filipino people. No? To be technical about it, it was not really legitimately recognized as the Constitution of the Philippines because at that time, 1935 was prevailing. Okay? So it was ratified in 1943 by an assembly of appointed provincial representatives of the Kalibapi, the organization established by the Japanese to supplant all previous political parties. Again, when did they rise political parties? When's the start of the rise of political parties? In the 1935 Constitution. No? The Second Republic was formally complained 1943. So it was from 1943 to 1945. Jose P. Laurel, no? Diba we call him as puppet of Japanese government. He was appointed by the National Assembly. Laurel was highly regarded by the Japanese for having openly criticized the U.S. So if you criticize the U.S., if you dislike U.S., you are accepted under 1943 Constitution. So they ran the Philippines, and because he had a degree, so he actually graduated from Tokyo International University. It remained in force in Japanese-controlled areas of the Philippines, but was never recognized as legitimate or binding by the governments of the U.S. or of the Commonwealth of the Philippines and guerrilla organizations loyal to them. Okay? So it was not really accepted generally by the Filipino people. So let's proceed with the 1973 Constitution, or this is famous or also known as the Saligang Batas, no, or the Marcos Constitution kung sa elementary history teacher pa ang moingon. Okay? It was ratified on January 17, 1973, which provided for a shift from a presidential form of government to a parliamentary system. So when we say parliamentary system, the head of the government is not the president anymore, but the prime minister. Okay, unlike in presidential form of government, the president is the head of the state and also the head of the government. Usually in parliamentary system, the head of the state is the prime minister and the president is only the head of government, rather, is the prime minister, and the president is the head of the state, meaning it's merely symbolic, no? So there are certain powers that is given to the president under a parliamentary system, but the powers or the specific powers or major responsibilities are given to the prime minister as the head of the government. Okay? One example for that would be Canadian Prime Minister, si Trudeau. No? So he's the head of the government, but he's not the head of the state. Okay? The president served as a symbolic head of the state, and the prime minister exercised executive powers and functions. So, mas powerful si prime minister. I mean, as far as responsibilities are concerned, no, prime minister has a lot of burdens compared to president under a parliamentary form. The legislative power is vested in a unicameral National Assembly. So balik tayo sa unicameral, no? So during the Malolos Constitution, that was unicameral, tapos nag-bicameral, and then nag-unicameral na naman. Okay? All right. So in 1986 Provisional Constitution, this is actually not famous to all Filipinos because it has a very, very short existence in the Philippines, no? It is popularly known as the Freedom Constitution. So this is right after the exile of President Marcos, no? When President Marcos departed from Philippines. So when the President Marcos was overthrown, no? in accordance with the people power. So since wala nang, when we say overthrown, you are already removing the president or the government of Marcos at that time. So as a temporary constitution, because it's impossible for the state to exist without any rule or without any document, that's why they created the Freedom Constitution while they are still writing the 1987 Constitution. So, mo ni siya ang nahitabo ato nga time. Okay? So, again, if there is no rule that would govern the people, there might be anarchy, no? So, it was promulgated by President Corazon Aquino on March 25, 1986. It was a provisional constitution after a successful people power revolution. So, when we say provisional, kanang temporary lang, no? Kay tungod wala pa man tay bag-o nga konstitusyon, magbuhat usa ta og temporary nga balaod. Okay? Executive and legislative powers are exercised by the president and shall continue to exercise legislative powers until a legislature is elected and convened under a new constitution. This is actually the start also. Now, for those who do not know, this is also the start of the political career of President Duterte, because during this time, President Duterte was appointed as OIC Vice Mayor of Davao City. Okay, that's why if you remember in 2010, Duterte supported Aquino because he has a debt of gratitude to the Aquino family. Because it was only during this time when he started his political career, just like Jejo Marbinay. No, he was also elected, or rather not elected, but appointed as OIC Mayor of Makati City. Okay, the case of Duterte in Davao City. So moto na OIC Vice Mayor, tapos na he ran for mayor, and then until he dominated Davao City for mayoralty position. So this is the proclamation on March 25. Okay, proclamation number 3 as the president, declaring a national policy to implement reforms mandated by the people, protecting their basic rights, adopting a provisional constitution, and providing for an orderly transition to a government under a new constitution. So this is the basis, no, of the 1986 Provisional Constitution. Now we proceed with our recent and present constitution of the Republic of the Philippines. The 1987 Philippine Constitution was ratified on February 2, 1987. It is the 4th fundamental law to govern the Philippines since it became independent on July 4, 1946. Okay. The 1987 Constitution established a representative democracy with power divided among the 3 separate and independent branches of government: the executive, the bicameral legislature, and the judiciary. So there are still 3 branches of government. As we all know, no, it's part of the requisites of a good written constitution. So there must be a constitution of government. Okay. So when we say Republican government, the officers or the public officials are directly elected by the people because it is a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. There were 3 independent constitutional commissions under the new constitution. We have the COA, or the Commission on Audit, the Civil Service Commission, and the Commission on Elections. So when we say independent, they are not they are non-partisan. Okay, so they have greater budget compared to agencies or other agencies of the government to maintain its independence. Okay, what else? The office of the ombudsman, no, it should be independent. Okay, so even if you are a public officer, no, let's say sa COA, if there is deficiencies in your finances in the agency, no, after formal audit coming from the COA, no, so you can be held liable for corruption. Integrated into the Constitution was a full Bill of Rights, which guaranteed fundamental civil and political rights, and it provided for free, fair, and periodic elections. Okay, so under our Article 3, it provides for the Bill of Rights. Okay. Speaking of Bill of Rights class are rights granted by the Constitution to protect the people from the abuses of government. Okay? So let's say right against unreasonable search and seizure. So when you cross checkpoint in Lasang, for example, no, if there is no Bill of Right granting us right against unreasonable search and seizure, well, the soldiers there or the police there or the officer, so to speak, can just open your trunk or your doors and your check your bags, for example, no, if there's no Bill of Rights or if there's no right provided by the Constitution. But since we have right against unreasonable search and seizure, they can only search and seize our properties if there is a search warrant coming from the government or by the judge. Okay, so always remember and take note that this is usually the misconception of the Filipino people, that when they say Bill of Rights, they can invoke these rights against private persons. No, you cannot do that. No, Bill of Rights can be invoked only against the government. So for example, your classmate is checking your phone without your permission. You cannot say na, "Huy, I have the right to privacy baya under the Constitution." That's wrong, because it can only be invoked against the government. If the one checking your phone is a public officer, then that's a better, or that's the proper application of the Bill of Rights. But you cannot invoke or apply these rights against your colleagues or your classmates, no? So ay pataka na moingon ka nga, uy, right to privacy kuman ni. Pinagugoy ka ng kuan, ako'y right of expression. Oh. Mana pwede day moingon ka nga kanang your classmate is rapist. Pwede ba day na siya because that's part of your freedom of expression? No. Because again, our freedom of expression is also limited. So pwede makamalibel ana, no? Pwede ka maslander. Okay? So in all our rights, there is always limitation to it. Okay? So let's look at the three branches of the government. We have legislative, who makes the law, legislative department, who makes the law. Okay? Again, we are following a bicameral system. When we say bicameral, there are two chambers, the Senate and the House of Representatives. Second branch, the executive, it carries out the law. Let's say, for example, when the legislative department would enact a law prohibiting smoking in public places, that's the law, no? But the law would be useless without executive department because mag-remain lang yan siya na law, no? So paano mo siya i-implement? Paano mo siya i-execute? That's the job of the executive department, no? The police officers are actually under the executive department. So paano ba yan? Kung let's say si A, no, nanigarilyo siya in public, well, the public officer or the police officer can arrest A, no, for smoking in a public place. So in that case, executive department is implementing the law. Okay? So without executive department, the law will just be a law, will just be a written law, no? So to put some power, okay, on the law created by the legislative department, we need the executive department to do that. Okay, so the head of the executive department is the president. Okay, and of course we have the vice president. What's the duty of the vice president? To wait until the president dies? No. No, the primary duty of the vice president, although it was not specifically contained in the Constitution, but its duty is to secure that the laws are properly executed. And also we have cabinet members, Secretary of Finance, Secretary of Health, Secretary of DOST, and all the secretaries. They're the cabinet members. Okay. Last branch, the judicial branch of government. It evaluates the law. Okay. So we have the Supreme Court as the highest court of the land and the supreme law of the land. Okay. We also have other courts. What are these other courts? We have municipal trial courts, not Tulfo court, ha? No, that's not recognized under the Constitution. Municipal court, regional trial court, court of appeals, and the Supreme Court. Okay? So if natalo ka sa municipal trial court, pwede ka magpunta sa regional trial court. Kung again, talo ka pa rin sa regional trial court, pwede ka pumunta sa court of appeals. Kung talo ka pa rin sa court of appeals, pwede kang pumunta sa Supreme Court, which is the last arbiter. Okay? So kung talo ka sa Supreme Court, that's the final judgment, no? So you cannot revoke it anymore. Okay, just read it. President has one term for 6 years, and Vice President, let's say in the case of Vice President Lenny, she can still run as VP for the second term. Okay. We also have the legislative department, the Senate, and the district representatives, and judicial department such as judges and justices of the Supreme Court. They do not have a term limit, but the mandatory retirement of every judge is when they reach the age of 70. Okay. Under the principle of co-equal and coordinate powers among the three branches, the officers entrusted with each of these powers are not permitted to encroach upon the powers confided to the others. So this is what we call as the principle of separation of powers. Meaning, si Senator Pacquiao, as a senator of the Philippines, no, he cannot go to Malacanang and let's say declare martial law because that's not part of his duty. Okay? Or President Duterte will go to Ecoland RTC, okay? And he will bang the gavel there. He cannot do that because that's not part of his duty. He's not a judge. He's a president. Okay? So one officer of the other department cannot encroach to the duty of the other department. So we also have principle of checks and balances. Each department is checking other department to maintain transparency and to